And today marks the one-year anniversary since the shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. 19 children, 2 teachers lost their lives in that shooting. 17 more people were injured when a gunman entered the school and started shooting. Just a short time ago, President Biden delivered remarks. Here's what he had to say.
Too many schools, too many everyday places have become killing fields in communities all across every part of America. And in each place, we hear the same message. Do something. For God's sake, please do something. So it's time to act. It's time to act. It's time to make our voices heard. Not as Democrats or as Republicans, but as friends, as neighbors, as parents, as fellow Americans.
So to the panel now, we've heard the president basically deliver this exact message or a version of it for quite some time, unfortunately. Here in Washington, though, it's not like anybody's expecting congressional action, Democrats and Republicans, to come together on this issue of guns and what to do. So I guess the question around the table is, like, is this going to be left up to the states going forward? Any sort of movement? Is that the way forward here?
Well, in Congress, in Washington, let's just be clear, there's very little conversation about this issue.
Yet alone action.
Yeah, so they're not even talking about it. They passed legislation a year ago, and people acknowledged that even with that minor legislation, which was the most expansive legislation in more than 2 decades, that it's probably the last time for a long time. And states are acting, but you have a vast array of what the states are doing. It's a red state versus blue state situation and disparate gun laws.
I agree with Leanne that it is a states issue, but, you know, and that's how it's going to be affected, and that's what a lot of the gun control groups are really focusing on. But I just want to quickly make a separate point. When you hear President Biden talking in those kind of circumstances, everyone thinks back to the same thing, I think, which is that he himself is very familiar with terrible laws. His wife and his infant daughter, and later his son. I think that display of empathy, that depth of empathy he can show at moments like that, I think those are some of his most powerful moments as a politician, as president.
Well, I would say empathy is one of the scarcest resources we have in politics right now, and I think we need that more across the aisle. Now, mentioning the gun violence bill that passed through Congress last year, no one thought that was going to happen. That was a major bipartisan victory dealing with red flag laws across the country. A couple of years prior to that, my organization was involved in the authorization for the CDC to study gun violence as a public health issue. So things are possible, but I would agree a lot more can be done at the state level. One huge opportunity is gun licensing. If you need to have a license to drive a car, you should have a license to carry a firearm.
You know, Rebecca, in the state of Texas, House Bill 2744 had raised the legal age to 21 for someone to buy an AR-style firearm, prohibit the sale of a firearm to someone who's intoxicated or someone who has an active protective order. That's in Texas, a state with a Republican legislature. Do you think that's kind of what we start to see, pieces like that in states both red and blue, maybe?
Well, leave it up to the voters to figure out what some pragmatic ways, based on the facts of the cases. The thing about this particular horrible tragedy is, I mean, as a mom, too, can barely even think about it for more than just a second before it's just deeply upsetting. But, you know, unless there's going to be legislation that's going to legislate courage to the police department, this was not going to affect this particular school shooting. You know, 77-minute delay before police responded in to go in to take out this particular shooter. So, again, I mean, understand the deep empathy. I think it's to make something like this partisan is just a tragedy on top of a tragedy. The whole country would like to see this stop. It's just what is going to affect that and actually make that a reality.
But the whole country agrees, for example, with universal background checks, 70 or 80%, and there's still no congressional action about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say, fine, if you're going to have, I mean, universal background checks, I'll leave it to the experts to decide if that's going to actually help. But in this particular case, we're talking about the anniversary of this particular tragedy. That would not have affected this particular incident. We understand that it was the police negligence, and they need to be held accountable for that particular issue. And so I think it's very important that, as emotional as this is, that we look based on the facts and to try to understand how we can make sure this particular thing doesn't happen again.
What do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think, I mean, background checks are helpful, and the issue that's underneath your question now is, why can the 90% issue actually pass through Congress? And that gets at structural issues that don't get talked about. You have to talk about our closed primary system in many of our states. You have to talk about money in politics. You have to talk about the structural reasons why there's real partisan polarization on this if you want to understand why there's not more action on gun violence.
All right. I have to leave it there. It's obviously an awful tragedy. You talk about like being a parent and thinking about it. We heard from the president today on it.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.